You know, at first, I thought this was like the best way to start off the Nyx review, but then I realized it's a reference from a game that was made in 1997, and now I feel really old. Good job, me. So first up, to get the original Nyx, you will have to fight Forid, which is an infested boss that only appears if an infested invasion takes over a boss node. And you get all the parts you need for Nyx Prime from relics. So the blueprint is a common drop from Lith S2 and Neo V1 relics. Neuroptics are a rare drop from the Meso N1 relic. Chassis is a rare drop from the Neo N1 relic. And systems are an uncommon drop from the Neo S2 relic. Nyx is a pretty standard squishy caster. She has 100 health and shields, which both go up to 300 at rank 30, 50 armor, which is very low, 150 power, which goes up to 225 at rank 30, sprint speed of 1.1, which makes her faster than a lot of other Warframes, and she has 3 polarities, a V, a dash, and an additional dash in the aura slot. Nyx Prime is just a straight up upgrade over the original Nyx. She has 125 shields, which go up to 375 at rank 30, 50 armor, which is still pretty low, but it's not as bad as on the original Nyx. She is a little bit faster with sprint speed of 1.125, and she has 1 more D polarity, so she has a V, a D, a dash, and an additional dash in the aura slot. Nyx's toolkit is designed to control the battlefield, whether it is by mind-controlling enemies, affecting them with radiation, or projecting her image in the eyes of every enemy so they are confused and fight each other. And since she is very squishy, she also has one ability that allows her to absorb a lot of damage and return it back to the enemies. Even her passive is designed to screw over the enemy, because every time you hit an enemy with one of your abilities, there is a chance that you will disarm them. And before we take a closer look at her abilities, I just want to say that all the augments for her abilities can be obtained by either reaching the rank of Maxim under the Arbiters of Hexes, or the rank of Flawless under New Loka, and they cost 25,000 standing each. So Nyx's first ability is called Mind Control, where she mind controls a target that's up to 60 meters away for 30 seconds. The mind control target will kind of follow you around if you run too far from them, but ranged units from the Grenier, Corpus, and Corrupted faction do like to take cover and occasionally get stuck. And the enemies will find your mind control target as if it was another Warframe, and your mind control target will take full damage from them. But if you or your allies shoot at the mind control target, it will not take any damage directly, and it will be stored and then dealt as one big burst of damage when the mind control runs out or you cancel the ability. And this is a pretty good way of dealing with really tough targets, because you can simply mind control them, then unload everything you have onto them, and then simply cancel the mind control, killing them. Now, if you mind control a target that has an ability or an aura like an infested ancient, they will keep that aura and will give the benefits to your team. And this is pretty cool if you can get your hands on something like a Shield Osprey, which will give you bonus shields, or one of the infested ancients, which can give you a damage reduction aura. Now, if you mind control a summoner unit, so something like a Haika Master, it will keep spawning Haikas, which will be friendly, but if your Haika Master dies or the mind control duration runs out, they will turn hostile again. The duration of the mind control is affected by power duration mods, and the range at which you can mind control an enemy is affected by power range. The augment for mind control is called Mind Freak, which increases the damage your mind control target does by 500%, which is affected by power strength, so you can push it even higher. Now, the problem with this augment and the ability in general isn't that the augment or the ability are bad, but the enemy AI is really dumb. It's not so obvious when you are fighting them with a Warframe because you are constantly in their face, but when it's actually the AI versus the AI, you can see how stupid they are at times. So the best use for this ability is to simply find a big group of enemies, pick the toughest enemy and mind control them. So something like a Bombard, Heavy Gunner, or an Ancient, or something like a Sniper Crewman in defense, survival, and interception mission. In something like Exterminate, it's just not worth using this ability, because as you can see over here, my dude just decided that he's gonna take cover, and instead of killing the enemies, he's just gonna kill their cover. Yay. But as I've said earlier, if you use this in defense, survival, or interception, and you pick something like an Eximus unit that has a lot of damage or a lot of crowd control, this ability can be pretty effective. Nyx's second ability is called Psychic Bolts, where Nyx launches 6 telekinetic bolts that will seek enemies out and deal 200 slash damage with a 10% chance to proc slash. On top of that, when they hit the enemy, they will do small AoE that does 15 radiation damage and has a 50% chance to proc radiation. Now, the slash part of this ability is so-so, because the chance of proccing it is very low, and on top of that the ability doesn't do a lot of damage, so even if you proc slash, you're not gonna do a lot of damage with the damage over time effect. The radiation part, however, is much better, because even though it doesn't do a lot of radiation damage, it has a 50% chance of proccing the radiation status effect, which confuses the enemies and makes them unable to distinguish between friend and foe, so they will fight everything for 12 seconds. The damage done by this ability is affected by power strength mods, and it's a one-handed ability, so you can use it while performing many actions, including reloading. And just one more thing before we take a look at the augment, this ability will not target enemies behind obstacles, so you have to have line of sight of the enemy. The augment for psychic bolts is called pacifying bolts, which will cause the bolts to stun enemies for 10 seconds, which is affected by power duration mods. Now this augment is the reason why I mentioned the duration of the radiation proc, because the radiation lasts for 12 seconds and this augment will stun the enemy for 10 seconds, so it basically just nullifies the radiation effect. But it is a pretty cool augment if you want some crowd control. Nyx's third ability is called Chaos, where Nyx causes chaos in an area of 25 meters for 25 seconds. She will do this by projecting her image into the minds of all the enemies, so they perceive each other as Nyx Prime. This will cause them to act as if they were affected by radiation, so they are confused, they can't distinguish between friend or foe, and they will fight everything. And this, by the way, still includes you. However, the affected enemies are considered a higher threat level, so they do take priority over you or your allies. And this does not work on bosses, so if you use this on a boss, it will just stun them. Now, there is a couple of enemies that are affected slightly more than others, so for example, Shield Ospreys will no longer be able to use their shield buff, so they will just fly around until the ability duration runs out, and Ancient Healers will still try to heal everything, but they can only heal themselves. And probably the best one for you and your allies is that the auras of Eximus units will affect all enemies within range, so if you have like an Arctic Eximus, it will slow everyone down. The duration of chaos is affected by power duration, the radius in which you cause chaos is affected by power range, and you can recast the ability while it's already active. The augment for chaos is called Chaos Sphere, which upon casting chaos will create a sphere that will inflict chaos on any enemy that enters it. The sphere only takes 50% duration from chaos and will slowly shrink down. And this is a really good augment for horde mode missions, so defense, survival, mobile defense, and interception. Because as new enemies are spawning and they're running in, they won't be affected by chaos, so you would have to cast chaos over and over and over again to keep everyone confused. Now, since the sphere or the wall that you create shrinks down, in order for it to be effective, you have to have a good combination of power duration and power range. Because if you just have a ton of power range, yes, the sphere will start off very big, but will shrink very quickly. And if you just have a lot of power duration, yes, the sphere won't shrink as fast, but it will start off fairly small. And Nyx's final ability is called Absorb, where Nyx starts meditating, becomes immune to all crowd control, and starts absorbing all damage. Now, the area in which you absorb all damage is indicated by a sphere, and the radius of the sphere is affected by power range mods. Now, Absorb will drain 4 energy every second, plus 8 energy for every 1000 damage that you absorb. And the amount of damage you absorbed can be seen at the top right corner of the screen. The base energy drain is affected by both power efficiency and power duration, where power efficiency has a much more noticeable effect, but power duration is still noticeable, especially if you go into negative power duration. And the energy that's drained based on the amount of damage you took is only affected by power efficiency. And while you're channeling Absorb, it will also deactivate most ways of gaining energy, so things like Energy Siphon are deactivated, Xenoric passive ability is deactivated, you can't get energy from Energy Vampire, but one way you can get energy is through Syndicate procs. And this is especially useful if you are using the augment, which I will talk about later. Now, while you're channeling Absorb, you can't move or shoot. All you can do is just sit there and absorb damage. And this goes for both enemy damage and the damage your allies inflict onto the bubble. And this, by the way, can be really dangerous if you're using Chaos as sort of an oh shit button, so a defensive ability. Because if an ally shoots your bubble with a fully format Tigris Prime, they will drain a lot of your energy. However, you can also use this as an offensive ability, because pressing the ability button again will take all the stored damage and release it as an explosion of magnetic damage, which is affected by power strength, in an area of 10 meters, which is affected by power range. And in this case, if your allies are shooting your bubble with something like Tigris Prime, it's just gonna add to the damage you're gonna do once you deactivate the ability. Overall, this is a pretty good defensive ability. It is pretty versatile because if you have enough power range, you can cover an entire cryopod, so it's good for defense missions. And as I've said already, it can be a pretty good oh shit button as well, because if you suddenly start taking a lot of damage, you can start meditating, absorb all that damage, press the ability button again, and kill whatever is trying to kill you. The augment for absorb is called assimilate, and this is perhaps the most terrifying thing in Warframe. What this augment allows you to do is to move, shoot, and generally attack when you're channeling absorb. But you can only move at 50% of your movement speed. You cannot run, jump, or perform any maneuvers whatsoever. I can't even imagine how terrifying it must be for the enemy to see just this Nyx slowly walking towards them with something like War or Galatine Prime. And I almost forgot to mention that this will also reduce the size of the absorb bubble by half. And it's also why using weapons that have a syndicate proc which restores your energy is so good. Because you can just walk around, shoot enemies, and when you get enough affinity, the proc will go off, damage a bunch of dudes, and it will restore your energy so you can walk around and absorb even more. Now, if you know me, you know that I love Nyx. I simply love this Warframe. I absolutely adore the toolkit that DE gave her. Nyx was the first Warframe that I really wanted to get, and once I got her, I was really impressed with the toolkit and everything you could do with it. And this was before some of the quality of life changes, like being able to cast Chaos if you already have it active on some enemies. This was the first Warframe that I was able to solo Void Defense with. When I finally got Nyx, I didn't touch another Warframe for like 2 months. I only played Nyx. And even though I don't play her as much anymore, I still love taking her into like a big defense style set or into interception missions and just causing havoc. Nyx, in my opinion, is one of those Warframes that everyone should have. It doesn't matter if it's just the regular one, but you have to have Nyx. She's a ton of fun to play, and she scales incredibly well into high levels, because even though she's pretty squishy and she can die very quickly if played carelessly, she can do an absurd amount of damage in high levels. Not by herself, but by simply convincing one enemy that shooting his friend in the face is a good idea. So yes, I would definitely recommend Nyx. As I said already, this is one of those Warframes that everyone should have, or at least try. And that's pretty much it for the video, so I thank you very much for watching, as always, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.